Hello friends, welcome back. Today we would be learning a very important and interesting topic, that is how to fill a web form using Excel macros. So for achieving this, we'll take this example. This is the Internet Explorer browser and this is the page, and if you wish to populate these fields, first name, last name, email ID, password, the drop down list, I'm taking this example specifically because we have all the different kinds of elements. We have the text boxes, we have the drop down, we have the radio button, so everything is available over here. So we would be trying to fill all these details through the Excel macro. One point to remember is that whenever we are trying to automate a web application using Excel macros, that would work only on Internet Explorer browser. It would not work on other browsers. So keep this in mind, and if you are trying to achieve automation using Excel macros, you should be using Internet Explorer or the Edge browser. So let's begin. This is my Excel file. Now a quick revision, if you are trying to use Excel macros, there are a few settings I had already shown in my previous video, but we'll do a quick revision. If you want to enable the macros on your Excel workbook, what you have to do is, if you are using Microsoft Office 2007, which I am using, you have to click on this Office button icon on the top. Here you have to select the Excel options. Here on the left hand side, go to Trust Center, and here on the right hand side you have something called Trust Center settings. Click on that button, and on the next window you'll have something called macro settings. Now you'll have multiple tabs. Select the macro setting tabs, as you can see, and on the right hand side you have this last option called enable all macros. You should select that option and check this option, trust access to the VBA project model. Finally we'll click OK. But just one thing to remember, if in case you are using Microsoft Office 2010 and above, do not worry, the steps are exactly the same. The only difference is here we are navigating to this Trust Center through this icon, Microsoft Office icon over here. If you're using Microsoft Office 2010 and above, instead of this icon you'll have something called a File tab over here, and within the File tab you'll have to perform the same steps which we have done over here, and finally click the OK button. So once you do this, you are in a position to write macros in your Excel file. So this was the settings. Now let's go and start coding and automating the web application. So to move to the developer window, what you have to do is you have to remember these keys. The keys are Alt and function F11. I repeat, Alter key and function F11 pressed together. When you do that, this kind of a window would open, and here you would be writing the code to automate the web application. So once you are at this window, what you have to do is, on the top, do a right click, insert module. So by default the name of the module is module 1. You could write any name of your choice. I'm writing module underscore web form underscore automate. You could use any name of your choice. And here on the right hand side we have this editor where we would be actually writing the code. Start writing the code over here. You have to begin with this syntax. First of all, you'll have to define a sub, which is kind of a function. So the keyword is sub sub, and the name of the sub, which is of your choice. You could write any name. Here I am writing the name as test1. It is up to you, whatever name you prefer, you could mention it over here. The brackets, and press enter. When you do that, end sub comes by default. So within the sub and end sub will come the code which will be actually populating the data on the web form. So here we'll start writing the actual code. So we'll begin with declaring the objects like this. I'll explain you the syntax. We are using Visual Basic, it supports Visual Basic for applications VBA. So we have the declarations are like this. Dimension IE is any name. I have given the name IE for Internet Explorer browser, so you could give any name over here as object. And on the second line we are initializing the IE object which we defined in the first line. the syntax for initializing the Internet Explorer application goes like this. Whatever object name you have given is equal to create object, and within brackets, within double inverted quotes, Internet Explorer dot application. Like we are telling that we would be launching an Internet Explorer application through this object IE. So the syntax is very simple. Set object name is equal to create object within brackets, within inverted quotes, Internet Explorer application. Now I'll explain you a very important setting which you should do. Like if you see on the top, there is something called tools menu. Click on that tools menu under which you have references. Go to references, and this kind of a window would come up. Now what you have to do is you have to make sure that these options, Microsoft HTML object library and Microsoft Internet Controls, these two options are checked. Like if in your Microsoft Excel, if these options are not checked, then you will find these options somewhere below. You'll have to search them. Like there is a long list, you'll have to search them, and once you find them, you have to just check them and click on OK, which I have done like this. Why we have to do this, I'll explain you in few minutes, but make sure you keep a check on these two items, Microsoft HTML object library, Microsoft Internet Controls. These should be checked like this, and finally click on OK. So now coming back to the code, at this point we have created the object of Internet Explorer. So the next step would be to launch it. For that, you will have to use the IE object and tell the IE object to navigate. Like the syntax is very simple. It is IE dot navigate and the website which you wish to navigate within the double inverted quotes. Like it is a very simple method, IE dot navigate and this website. Also I'll use the IE object once above this to make the browser visible. So what I'll write is IE dot visible is equal to true. This statement will make the browser visible. We would be able to see the actions performed by the script on the browser. So the next statement is very important, which is this while loop. Now this while loop, what it is doing, like while this website is getting loaded, it will ask the execution to pause. Like if you read the syntax, while IE is busy, application dot wait, and this is a VB function, date add, S is seconds, 1 is like wait for 1 second, now is the current, like wait for 1 second from the current time. This is in layman's language. So this loop will continue to iterate until this IE object which we created is busy. Once this website is loaded correctly, it will move out of the loop and the remainder of the execution will continue. So at this point we are in a position to interact with the web elements on the website. So this is the website, and if I wish to populate all these fields, first name, surname, mobile or email address, new password, birth date and gender, I should know some of the internal HTML properties of these web elements to interact with this. So we'll start with populating the first name, and similarly, because all these first name, surname, mobile, email address, new password, these all are text boxes. So first we'll fill these. So if I wish to enter something in the first name through our code, I will need some properties. To fetch the HTML properties, if you are using Edge browser like I am using, what you have to do is either hover to the element, do an inspect element. So this kind of a window would open up, and if you would see, something would be highlighted in light blue. So this light blue element is actually referring to this first name text box, and if you would see over here, the ID of this first name text box is u_0_j. So this ID we would be actually using in our script. So let's use that to populate something in the first name text box. So we'll move back to the code and use this ID property which we have just seen. So once again we'll go to the editor, and here we will write the statement to get the first name text box populated. Now if you would carefully observe, the statement goes like this: IE. Now IE was the object which we created for Internet Explorer browser. Then dot document dot get element by ID. Now if you would see, u_0_j is the ID. Here you could see is the ID of this first name text box. After which I am telling the script that the value of this text box should be test. So what will happen is, once this line of code will get executed, test would get populated here in the first name text box. So let's execute the script and see whether it works fine. So to execute it, either click this green button or just press the function key F5. Once you do that, you see this test is getting populated correctly in the first name text box which was intended. So this piece of code is working absolutely fine. But if you would observe one thing, when we wrote this statement, like this statement IE.document.get element by, like if you will manually type all these things, IE.document dot, you will observe that there is no IntelliSense, and it becomes quite difficult if there is no IntelliSense to predict which function and which property we should be using, and also there are chances that we would make spelling mistakes. So to make the IntelliSense work, we have to do some kind of setting and writing some kind of a code. The settings we have already done in the early part of the video. We went to tools, references, and selected these options: Microsoft HTML Object Library and Microsoft Internet Controls. These are required for getting the IntelliSense to work. So make sure you do these settings. So this was about the settings, and the code goes like this. What you have to do is create another object, set doc is equal to IE, which was the object of Internet Explorer which we created above, dot document. I'll explain you what this statement means, but before that, since we are using this doc object and assigning this to IE.document, it is very important first we declare what kind of an object this doc is. So I'll declare it as dimension doc as HTML document. Now this is very important, because we are telling that this doc object is of type HTML document. So what it does is, like the entire page, that is, this entire page would be referred by this doc object. In other words, this doc object will store the entire HTML DOM of this page. So once this is done, now I'll show you how we can use this doc object and make the programming a bit easy. Now when we used IE.document.get element by ID, we did not get any help of IntelliSense. But now when I use this doc, which is of type HTML document, see what happens. If I write this similar statement, doc dot, now if you see, this IntelliSense has started working. If I just type the few letters of get element by ID, see, if I just typed in get, I got this option, get element by ID. Automatically here I will give the ID, dot value is equal to, within double inverted quotes, test. So this thing will perform the same operation which this statement would do. So let's test these two lines of codes and check whether it does the same task. So first we'll execute this line which I am highlighting right now. So for that I'll comment out the last line by putting a single quote in front of that line. So once I do that, this becomes green, which is now commented, so this line of code would not get executed. So first we'll test this line, then we'll comment this line and uncomment this line to see whether it performs the same task. So let's execute this after saving it. So I click on this green button on the top and let's see what happens. So if you would observe over here, test has come in this text box which was expected. So this line of code is working as expected. Now let's test the below line. So before doing that, I would just close this browser which was opened through a script. Now I am commenting this line and uncommenting the below line, saving it, Control S, and now I'll execute it once again and let's see what happens. So now the page has loaded, and if you see, the text box has correctly written test, which means this line of code is working absolutely fine as expected. So the advantage of these settings which we did and created this doc object is that you'll get the help of IntelliSense, which would make your task easier while programming. So at this point we have successfully populated the first field, which is the first name field. We'll have to repeat similar steps for the rest of the text boxes like surname, mobile or email address and new password. The steps would be same. You have to pick up the ID and just use it in our script. So I'm not repeating these steps because I have already fetched those IDs, so I'll just use it in our code like this. So the corresponding IDs, like this belongs to the last name, this is for the email ID, and this one is for the password. Now comes the interesting part, because now we need to handle these drop downs like the day, month and year. These three are drop downs. Now how to handle these drop downs through the VBA code? So first of all, we need to see the internal HTML properties. So what I'll do is I'll take my cursor to this pointer which is over here, and now try to see the properties of this birthday drop down. So if you see its properties, its ID is day, 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 and here are the option values, like within the drop down what are the values available are seen over here. So if you see carefully, the value field here, the important actor is the value field. The value field over there we need to use in our VBA code. So whatever day I wish to populate in this drop down, the corresponding value I need to write in our script. For example, if I wish to use 10th, so the value over here is 10. So it does not matter in this case because the value and the actual data are the same. But if you see the next drop down, which is the month drop down, this is very interesting. The ID of this field is month, and if you see the option values, like the actual data is Jan, Feb, March, April, whatever, but the value fields are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if you wish to populate these months in this drop down, you have to use the values which are over here and not the actual text which you can see as Jan, Feb, March. So now let's go ahead and use these values and populate these three drop downs. So you should know the IDs, like the ID of this month drop down is month. Let's see what is the ID of the day. It is DAY, day, and here it is YEAR, year. So we'll use these three IDs and populate a birth date in these fields. So let's go back to the code here. you go. So here I have written the code to enter these values. Like when I say document.getElementById by ID day, I'm referring to this field and I'm setting the value as 5. So when the code would be executed, this field would be populated with 5. Second option, the value is 2. So the month drop down would be populated with February. And finally I have written the value as 1989 for year. So let's execute this and see what it results into. So for execution, I'm just clicking this green button on the top. The page has loaded, and if you'd see here, it has populated all the fields. And if you'd see the drop down value, it is correctly showing as 5th Feb 1989. So which means we are successfully able to populate all these fields from the macro code. One thing is remaining is the gender field. So the gender fields are these radio buttons. To handle these radio buttons are very simple. We just have to perform a click operation. So we should know the HTML ID and just perform a click operation and we would be done. So let's check the ID of these controls. Once again, I take the pointer to this field. So for female, the ID is U_0_9, and for male it is U_0_A. So now let's populate the form with the female radio button. So the code for this looks like this. So this line is for entering the gender as female. As you can see, the ID is U_0_9, which we saw it from the HTML, and the syntax is very simple. Like when we had to populate the text boxes and the drop downs, we were using dot value is equal to something. In this case, we have to just perform a click operation. So the syntax is document.getElementById, the actual ID, and just perform a click. And now let's execute this and let's see whether it correctly selects the female radio button. So to execute it, either press the function key F5 or just click this green button on the top. And if you see now, it has correctly populated all the values and the female radio button has been correctly selected. So what we have achieved is like we are able to fill the entire form using this macro code. It is very simple to achieve this, but if you see here, we have hard coded all these values. We have not taken these values from any spreadsheet or anywhere. We have directly hard coded it. So this, like if I need to pick up these values from an Excel, like this is an Excel workbook and this workbook has sheets. So like if I want to pick up these values from this sheet, is it possible? The answer is yes, and we learn how to do it. This code is working absolutely fine. Just minor modifications will enable us to pick up the values from this Excel sheet. So let's start learning that. So now we wish to pick up these values which are there in this data sheet and populate the web form. Now one point to remember, this data sheet is in the same workbook, like this workbook which has this macro code is the same which has this data sheet. This is very important because the syntax which I'll be using now will work only if the data sheet from which you are picking up the data and the macro code are in the same Excel file, which in our case is true. This is our Excel file. The name is i_auto.xlsm, and within which we have this code and The data sheet is also within the same Excel workbook. Now it is very simple to pick up these values and populate our web form. So here you could see the first name is John and the last name is Roberts. Now if I wish to pick up these values from these cells and populate on our web form, what changes do I need to do in the code? So let's start making those changes. So this is the line which I am highlighting right now, which is populating the first name. At this point we have hard coded the name test. Now our intention is to pick up the value John from this data worksheet. So the changes would go like this. It is very simple, and the syntax is this workbook dot sheets, the name of the sheet, data dot range. I'll tell you what will come in the range, and finally dot value. Now I told you this workbook we are using because the macro code and the sheet from which we are fetching the data are in the same workbook. This line of code would not work if you are trying to fetch the data from an Excel sheet which is a part of another workbook. This workbook will only work if the macro code and the sheet are in the same workbook, which in our case is true. So here data is the actual name. Because the name of the worksheet is data, I have given data. If it would have been something else, if you would have been picking data from this sheet, then it would have been sheet 3, but we are picking up the data from this sheet whose name is data, hence I have mentioned data, then dot range, and here it is very important what I would be providing it over here. Now if you would see carefully, we are picking the first name from column A and cell 2. So this is the range A2. So I will mention this A2 in our code. Like this. Similarly, this is the code, the line which I am highlighting for the last name. So everything would be absolutely same. Here the range would change because A2 is referring to first name. I wish to populate the last name. So what would change is just the column. So the range for this would be B2. Okay, I'll save this. Let's execute this and see what happens. I click this green button on the top. And here if you would see John, last name Roberts, it has correctly picked up the values from the Excel and populated over here. Now you should be aware, like, we need to populate these fields as well. So it is pretty simple, like the email and the password. So what changes we have to do? It is a cakewalk now. Same code, I copied from here, paste it over here. This is for email ID. Just verify which is the column corresponding to email ID. In our case it is C, so we'll mention C. Next is the password field, which is there in the D column. So I mention here D. D is for password. Now comes the important part of the birthday, like the three fields, day, month and year. Now we had earlier seen for birthday and birth year, the values in the HTML and the actual text are the same. But for birth month, the value was different and actual text is different. We'll once again see that. So here if you would see the HTML properties of month, the value is different and the actual text is different. So how to handle this scenario? Because in our data sheet we have provided the birth month as Jan, which is the actual text and it is not the value. For birthday and birth year it is quite simple. We do not have to do anything because the values and the actual text match. So let's do something and handle the birth month. For birthday and birth year nothing would change. It would be the same thing which we are doing right now. For birth month we'll have to do some kind of manipulation. So let's move ahead. So the line which I'm highlighting right now is for day. So we'll use the same code, only we have to change the range. The range in the case of day would be E2. Now birth month is the important one which we'll take care later on, but birth year is also the same thing. So we'll just change its range. The range for birth year would be G. You could see birth year is referring to the G column. So here I mention G. So now we are left with month and the gender field. So first we'll handle the month. So for handling month, if you would see in your data sheet, the birth month would be as Jan, Feb, March, whatever, and the HTML for the same would be value equal to 1, 2, 3 and so on. So we come to know that there is a relation. If my birth month is Jan, the value is 1. If my birth month is Feb, value is 2. Similarly for March it is 3, April it is 4 and so on. So similar logic we'll have to place it in our code, which is very simple to achieve. So I'll write this if statement to handle the month field. The if statement in VBA is very simple. It is if. Now we have to pick up the value from the data sheet referring to the range. So the syntax is pretty similar. This work book dot sheets, exactly same, the one which was above. The data sheet we are referring, so the name is data dot range. Now it is in the F column, so the range would be F2 dot value. So if this value is equal to Jan, then this line document.getElement by id month dot value would be equal to 1, because 1 is the value which is corresponding to month Jan. Now we'll carry on. I'll write the else part. Else if, same syntax. This range dot value is equal to Feb. Then only the value part will change. Here if it is Feb, then dot get element by id month dot value would be equal to 2, and this would continue for all, like it would be from 1 to, like it would be from Jan to December. So I'm just writing for Jan and Feb now. You should be doing it for all the months. The better way of writing for all the months would be a select case or a switch case statement, but now we are just taking the example of Jan and Feb. So I'm writing the part for Jan and Feb, and I'll close this if statement with the syntax end if. I see it is marked in red, which means there is a syntax error. So the syntax error is I had placed a space between else and if, because of which it was creating a syntax error. But if I remove the space, then it goes and it's working fine now. There are no compile errors. Just I'll make the code a bit more readable. I'll just indent it. So if you would read these statements which I'm highlighting right now, it will make perfect sense. Like if my data sheet has the value Jan, then select the month which has value equal to 1. So in this case, Jan would be selected. And if the data value is Feb, it will go into the else part, and month with value 2 would be selected, which would be Feb. So let's execute this code and see what happens. If you would see over here in the data sheet, here we have mentioned Jan, so the birth date should read as 4th Jan 1972 on the web page. So let's see that. I'll click this green button on the top. The page has loaded, and now if you see, it has written the birthday as 4, month as Jan, year as 1972, which was expected. I'll close this browser. Now what I'll do is, in the data sheet, instead of Jan, I'll mention here Feb. I'll save this, and once again I'll execute to check whether these lines of code which I have written is working fine or not. In this case, the birth date should be 4th February 1972. So once again I'll execute this, and here if you would see, day is 4, month is Feb, year is 1972, so it is working as expected. So we have correctly fetched the value from the Excel file and populated the fields. Only thing remaining is the gender, which up till now is hard-coded. So in the data sheet, I'll add one more column because I haven't added this column. So I'll add this column and give the value as male. Now if we once again see the internal HTML properties, let's go to this pointer and go to this radio button male, then its ID is u_0_a, and for female, which we are using right now in the code, it is u_0_9. So once again we would use the if statement. It would go like this. If the range would be H, as you can see it in the data sheet, it is H. If this value, which is in the H column, cell 2, is equal to female, then click on the web element who has the ID u_0_9, which we know is for female. So here we have mentioned as female. In the else part, else if, same syntax, is equal to male, then something will come within the block. It would be same line of code, only change would be the ID. The ID for male radio button, as we saw, is, we'll just check it once again. For male, the ID is u_0_a, so we'll mention it over here. So u_0_a. So it is very simple. If the value from the data sheet is female, then click the object, the female radio object. If it is male, then click the male radio object. So our data sheet has the value mail. So when I execute this code, it should click on the mail radio button. So let's execute and see what happens. I'll save this file and now run by clicking this green button on the top, or just press F5. And now if you see, it has correctly clicked on the mail radio button. So we have achieved data entry of this entire web form from the Excel file. It is pretty simple. As a last step, what we'll do is, like when the operations are complete, we'll close the browser. To do that, we'll use the IE object which we had created, dot quit. This line will close the browser post execution. It would be very quick. I'll just show you. When I execute this, it opens the browser, populates the fields, and finally it closes the browser. So you should always close the browser when execution is done. So use this IE dot quit. So we have learned how to populate a web form using Excel macros. It is very simple and very interesting. Now, one very important point: when you save this file, this entire Excel workbook, always save it as a Excel macro enabled workbook. Like if you see this drop down, you'll have multiple options. Give any name of your choice, but it should be Excel macro enabled workbook, and then you could save it. I'm just clicking yes over here. So we have learned how to populate the web from the Excel sheet using Excel macros. So we just populated one row from this data sheet. There could be scenarios where you would be having multiple rows like this. Like there could be multiple rows, which would be a more generic and realistic scenario where we would be having sheets with multiple rows of data. So what you have to do when you have this kind of a scenario, here we have just populated one row. So I just want you to give it a try. I'll give you a hint. You should use the for loop. With the help of the for loop, you would be able to populate all these rows of data into your web form. Just give it a try. I'll create a separate tutorial to explain that. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you like my video, I would request you to just subscribe to my channel so that you would be updated with the latest videos which I would be uploading. Thanks for joining. I would see you in my next tutorial. Thank you. Bye bye.